Hey guys, welcome back. So for this week you just have 2 lessons to do as well as your 2 video keyword submissions. So make sure you get the keyword submissions as well as your lessons done. Just like the last few weeks, your worksheets will be in the Google Drive folder. So that's not Google Classroom. It's a folder that's been shared with you on Google Drive. There's a whole folder with all of our assignments in there. So be sure you're checking that. That's where you find all of our worksheets. Let's go ahead and get started. So what we are looking at this week is dealing with units of measure. So the first thing we're looking at really here are customary units of measure. So we have different kinds of units of measure. So here in the United States, we have what's known as customary units of measure. So in this case, we're looking at how do you change from one unit of length to another. So 1 mile equals 1,760 yards. 1 mile also equals 5,280 feet. So 2 different conversions there. 1 yard equals 3 feet. 1 yard also equals 36 inches. 1 foot equals 12 inches. So these are the different conversions that you're going to need. You're going to need to know these. These are basic things to make sure you know. Hopefully 1 foot, 12 inches, 1 yard, 3 feet. Those are some pretty basic ones, so hopefully you remember those. So looking at this, to change from larger units of measure to smaller units, we're going to multiply. So larger units of measure, 1 mile is the largest unit of measure we have here. Yards are smaller and feet are smaller yet. Inches is the smallest unit we have. So miles the biggest, then yards, then feet, then inches. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. So we're going to multiply when we go from larger units to smaller units. So we have 11 feet equals how many inches? Well, we're multiplying. If we look up here, it says 1 foot equals 12 inches. So 11 feet is going to equal how many? Well, we're going to take 11 and multiply it by 12 because that's how many inches there are in 1 foot, and we have 11 feet, so we're going to multiply 11 by 12 to find out how many inches are in that 11 feet, which is 132. So it equals 132 inches. So that's how we go from a larger unit to a smaller unit. Now, to go from a smaller unit, so our inches is the smallest, to a larger unit, we divide. So when we're going from smaller to larger, we divide. When we're going from larger to smaller, we multiply. Keep that in mind. So we have 11 feet again, but this time we're converting it into yards and feet. So it's not going to be a perfect conversion. We're not going to get a whole number on this. So if we think about just the yard part first, 11 feet is how many yards? Well, how many feet are in 1 yard? There's 3 feet in 1 yard. So we're going to take this 11 feet and we're going to divide it by 3. So how many times can 3 go into 11? Well, it can go in there 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 11 minus 9 is 2. Now, when we were dividing before, we would take and we'd extend this and find the decimal. We're not going to do that here. So what we know is that there are 3 yards in 11 feet, because that's our whole number. And then how many feet are there left over? Well, the remainder was 2. So that's how many feet there are. So when you're taking and doing these that have multiple parts, so it's not just a perfect conversion to yards or a perfect conversion to feet, maybe. It depends on what the problem is. You're going to take and divide whatever your whole number is. That's what goes first. What the remainder is, so don't find the decimal, use the remainder. That's how many of the other smaller unit there are. Okay, you'll have a few problems like that where you'll have multiple parts. It won't be a perfect conversion. All right. Oh, that glare is terrible. Okay, so our next one, we have 9 feet equals blank yards. So first and foremost, are we going from a larger unit to a smaller unit, or a smaller unit to a larger unit? Feet are smaller than yards, so smaller unit to larger, we divide. So in 1 yard, there's 3 feet. So we're going to take 9 and divide it by 3, which gives us a perfect 3. So 9 feet, sorry about this glare. There we go. 9 feet is the same thing as 3 yards. All right, now we have 8 feet 7 inches, and we want to convert that to inches. So for right now, ignore the inches part, focus on the feet. Going from feet to inches, is that going from a larger unit to a smaller, or a smaller unit to a larger? It's going from a larger to a smaller. So that means we multiply. So there are 12 inches in every foot. So that means we're going to take 8 and multiply it by 12. Like I said, we're ignoring that 7 because it's already in the unit of measure that we need. So 8 times 12 is going to give us 96. Now we focus on this 7. So we're going to add the original 7 inches to the 96. So 96 plus 7 gives us 103. So it is 103 inches. So key thing here is when we're going from larger to smaller, you multiply. When you're going from smaller to larger, you divide. So we're going to keep seeing this. So this is when we're dealing with customary units of length. So this is looking at length. The next thing we're going to look at, so we've got a few other customary units that we're dealing with. We're also, hopefully I didn't erase that. We're also looking at it in terms of capacity. So filling things up, finding that amount, how much something can hold. So how do you change units of capacity? I can't seem to get this glare to work better for you guys. Maybe that'll work. Okay, so 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. 1 quart equals 2 pints. 1 pint equals 2 cups. And 1 cup equals 8 fluid ounces. So those are going to be the key things that you're going to need on this portion of the worksheet. So these are your different conversions. They're very helpful to know. If you cook at all or help your parents cook, these conversions can come in hand when maybe you have a container that's telling you amounts in pints, but you need to know how many cups that is for what you're going to take and cook. So these are helpful to know in real world situations. All right, so once again, like I said, you're going to hear this a lot through this lesson. To change a larger unit to a smaller unit, we multiply. So we have 3 cups equals how many fluid ounces? Well, a cup is larger than fluid ounces, so we're going to multiply like it says, and we're going to multiply by 8. So, prop this up a little better. 3 times 8 equals 24. So it's 24 fluid ounces are in 3 cups. Excellent. All right, next thing, to change from a smaller unit to a larger unit, we divide. Just like what we saw when we were dealing with our customary units of length. Same thing happens with customary units of capacity. So we have 6 pints equals how many quarts? So we go to quarts and pints. So quart is larger than pint. So we're going to take and divide, and 2 pints equals 1 quart. So we're going to divide by 2. So 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So it's 3 quarts. So these are the different abbreviations. So what I have in parentheses up here are those different abbreviations. You're going to see those a lot when you're taking and looking at the assignment. Rather than having quarts, gallons, pints, fluid ounces all wrote out, you're going to see these abbreviations. Gallon is the abbreviation GAL. So just a little heads up on that. Okay, so now some practice. We're going from 32 cups to gallons. Now, if we look, cups is all the way down here. It's definitely smaller than our gallons. But we have multiple steps to take and get there. So first, we need to convert our cups into pints. So we're going from a smaller to a larger, so we are going to divide. So we're going to take our 32 and we're going to divide it by 2 because that'll get us to pints because 2 cups equals 1 pint. So 32 divided by 2 gives us 16. So now we're in terms of pints. Now, pint, we go to the next higher unit of capacity is quarts. So every 2 pints, equals 1 quart. So once again, smaller to larger, we're going to divide. So divide by 2. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. So it's 8 quarts for our next value. Now, our final step, 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. Once again, quarts is smaller than a gallon. And for every 4 quarts, we get 1 gallon. So we're going to take this 8 and we're going to divide it by 4. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. So 32 cups is the same thing as having 2 gallons. So sometimes you might have multiple steps you have to follow through on this to get all the way from one unit of measure to another. So keep that in mind as you're going through these. All right, our next one, we have 16 quarts equals how many cups? So once again, we're going to have multiple steps here. So quarts, right here, is it bigger or smaller than cups? It's bigger, so we're going from a larger to a smaller, so we're going to multiply. So we're going to take that 16 quarts and we're going to multiply it by 2 because 1 quart equals 2 pints. So we multiply by the 2 to get it in terms of pints. So 16 times 2 equals 32 pints. Now we need to go from pints to cups. Once again, 1 pint equals 2 cups. So we're going to multiply by another 2. So 32 times 2 gives us 64. So 64 cups equals 16 quarts. All right, our next one. So we have 48 quarts equals how many pints? So looking back up here, is a quart bigger or smaller than a pint? It's bigger, so that means we're going to go from larger to smaller, so we multiply. And 1 quart equals 2 pints, so we're going to take our 48, prop this up a little bit, maybe. We're going to take our 48 and multiply it by 2, which is going to give us 96. So for 48 quarts, it's the same thing as having 96 pints. All right, and our last one, we are going from quarts to gallons. So looking back up here, are quarts bigger or smaller than gallons? They are smaller. So remember, smaller to larger, we divide. So looking up here, 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. That means we're going to take our 40 and divide it by 4. So that will give us 10 gallons. So 40 quarts is the same thing as 10 gallons. So these are how we do our conversions for customary units of capacity. Now you may have noticed I've been saying customary a lot within this lesson. So customary is our key word. Customary units are what we use here in the United States. Elsewhere we use different units of measure. Customary is specific to the United States. So keep that in mind as well. All right, so our last little bit, if I can pick up my slide, is looking at weight. So we've got length, customary units of length. We've got customary units of capacity, so how much it takes to fill something. And then we have customary units of weight, so how heavy something is. So remember, customary is your key word for this lesson. All right, so 1 ton equals 2,000 pounds, and 1 pound equals 16 ounces. So these are our conversions here. So fewer than what we've had in the previous. All right, once again, to convert from a larger unit to a smaller unit, we're going to multiply. So we're going from 5 tons to how many pounds? So our tons are larger than pounds. So we're going to take our 5 tons and we're going to multiply by 2,000. So 5 times 2,000. 5 times 2 is 10. And then we tack on 1, 2, 3 zeros. So it's 10, woo, falling board. Oops. It's 10,000 pounds. So 5 tons is the same thing as 10,000 pounds. All right, so to convert from a smaller unit to a larger unit, we divide, just like in the other ones. That's always going to be the case. When we go from something that's smaller to larger, we divide. When we go from larger to smaller, we multiply. So 250 pounds is how many tons? Well, pounds is definitely smaller than tons. We're going to take and divide by 2,000. So, can 2,000 go into 250? No. So we have to put a decimal. We're going to add a 0. Now, can 2,000 go into 2,500? Yes, it can. So it can go in once. We subtract. We're going to end up with 500. Now we add another 0. Bring it down. Can 2,000 go into 5,000? Yep, twice. 2 times 2,000 is 4,000. We end up with 1,000 left over. Now we add another 0, bring it down. So we have 10,000. Can 2,000 go into 10,000? That doesn't look like a 0, sorry. Yes, it can. It can go in 5 times. So that gets us a perfect 10,000. So this, 0.125, so 250 pounds is the same thing as 0.125 or 125 thousandths of a ton. So a very small amount of a ton. All right, now a couple more to practice with. So we have 48 ounces equals how many pounds? So is ounces smaller or larger than pounds? It's smaller. So to go from smaller to larger, we divide. So we're going to take our 48 ounces and divide by 16. And 16 can go into 48 3 times. So 48 ounces is the same thing as 3 pounds. All right, and our last one. We've got 16,000 pounds equals how many tons? So pounds to tons, are we going from smaller to larger or larger to smaller? Smaller to larger, excellent. So we're going to take and divide once again. So 16,000 divided by 2,000. 2,000 can go into 16,000 how many times? 8 times. Which works out perfectly. So it is 8 tons. So 16,000 pounds is the same thing as 8 tons. So these are our customary units of weight. So remember, customary is your key word. When you're going from a larger to a smaller unit, you are taking and multiplying. When you're going from a smaller to a larger, you are dividing. So keep that in mind. All right, have a wonderful week and happy mathing.